I'm excited to say that today for CxXchange Success Hour, we're going to be digging into the topic of the art and science of the apology conversation. And this is super exciting because, again, it comes from one of my favorite books now, as you know. It's the expansion sale. It's the one type of conversation we haven't covered yet. And yet they've tested it. They've tested all the elements. And of course, Shawn Stifler is the one who recommended the book to me. So we're excited to have him here to co-lead. And Cinthia Silva and I have been discussing these topics and others. And so, of course, she's coming to co-lead as well. So those are our two co-leads here today, Cinthia and Shawn. Last time, the three of us were all together co-leading. I think Shawn went first. So this time, Cinthia, why don't you go first? And just for anybody who may not have met you yet.
Yeah, of course. Hey, everybody. It's so great to be here. I love this topic because I'm a CS enthusiast, of course, but I've spent my whole career in front of clients. So I've had to apologize many, many times, for things go wrong, right? Things go wrong and you have to own it. But I really wish that this book was available 20 years ago. So I could have take the stress out of it by having a framework you could share internally. So I'm super excited for this topic.
Yay. Shawn?
Couldn't have said it better. Hi, I'm Shawn, Director of Success and Operations. Been on the front line for a long time and a lot of apologies. I wish I didn't have to do it the wrong way as many times as I have done it, to stumble across the preferred way. And we're most excited about that there's actually additional loyalty at the end of the tunnel and a better client relationship. And so it's very easy to get locked into and, oh my gosh, this is so bad, maybe some nervousness or commiserating even with the client. But if done right, you can have a much more loyal relationship and more fruitful relationship. And like Cinthia, I wish I had this book a long time ago, but I'm looking forward to diving into it.
Yeah, it's really true, right? Because I have been on both sides where it's an apology gone wrong and also an apology done right that did actually strengthen. And so we're definitely going to be able to share a few horror stories. But what I love about this too is just how they've, tested out some different elements. We'll get into that in a second. But we first wanted to just sort of get into not like the big kahuna kinds of apologies, right? Where you really have to dig in. But what are some of the other scenarios of apologies? And one is certainly just to get into is, we're not talking about support issues, right? Because if you're a CSM, unless you are wearing multiple hats, where you're both a support person, maybe an onboarding person, all of those things, as well as the strategic role of a CSM, then you might be doing support work and you might be working through some of those things. We're really talking about when there are things that are happening, say with the product or with the deliverables on the contract, right? And that's why then you get into.
Oh, Jen, you're on mute.
I've been talking all this time on
No.
mute.
You just went on mute. You're just saying that's
good.
why.
Okay.
And I don't know if you wanted to share the deck.
Am I not sharing the deck?
You're not sharing the deck.
Goodness. I thought I was sharing the deck too. See,
this is live, people. This stuff happens.
This is why I need friends around. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're not talking about support issues. We are talking about the difference, though, between when you're working through with a customer. There might be small types of apologies. There might be things that repetitively, continue to be issues, but we're not talking about like a support issue, right? Like when it is a support issue, you want to be sure that you're looping in support. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. And probably I should do a separate session just about that. But But I just wanted to sort of start off the conversation with that. The other thing I'll just say is that oftentimes we will over apologize. Like for some small thing, we'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm so sorry. And you know what? Then if you actually are really, really sorry, it all sounds like this. And so it's just repetitive. And then they're like, yeah, she never really is sorry. She's just, you know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things, like it's not good to over apologize. We even have, Shawn, was that a book you found in the resources, or is it an article that you found about over apologizing?
We had 2 articles and maybe a book too. Let me take a look here. We had the effortless experience, which talked a little bit about it, and then the expansion sale went into it quite a bit.
Oh, are these both? Oh, these are both articles. Okay, I'll have to change that. But anyway.
No. Well, I put in the effective apology and the apology impulse. Those are books.
Oh, they are books.
Yes.
Whole books about this. Wow, yeah. Crazy. All right. Anyway, so going back, where did I leave off that one of you can continue?
Well, Jan, if I could add to something, I recently had a coaching session with support and customer success due to some excessive apologizing for rather small things. And I shared some articles I'm going to look for while we're live on Toyota's defect rate, the godfather of lean production, Lean Six Sigma, quality, and never making mistakes. I pulled multiple examples of companies that are regarded for their production quality, and they make mistakes. So mistakes, I don't think perfection is expected, but as a provider or a vendor, we can really get in that mindset of, oh my gosh, it's a mistake. And it's not to dismiss a mistake by any means, but it's to remember that I don't know if customers expect perfection on average as it is. So let's just solve a problem and make it easy for them. And so it was very related to what we're talking about right now.
That's great. Yeah. And that's why we're sort of talking through and saying, document it, address the issue, and customer follow-up is always key. And that's what we have here. Like if it's, repetitive issue, then you have to be sure that you're addressing it, or else you start to lose trust with them. Right. But you want to be sure that you're also documenting what the frequency is, because if then you are trying to explain to somebody in product or engineering the context for, when these situations arise and what sort of context you're talking about with the customer, right? And if they don't understand what the frequency is or those types of things, then it's, it doesn't really translate, right? But what other thoughts did you have on it, Cinthia, before we get into the big kahunas?
Yeah, really, when I think of repetitive, and I was talking about this before we hopped on to the meeting with you all, every migration I've ever done has always like there's going to be something that goes wrong. And in my most recent experience, it was always the biggest clients, because they were the ones that took everything. So when you're doing a migration across a broad stream of like, in this case, it was alerts, there were some that were going to fall through the crack. And in one specific incident, there was an enhancement to this existing feature, a feature for this enhancement to a feature, and it unwittingly suppressed the whole feature. And we didn't know about it for like 3 weeks. And we're like, oh my God, this thing's that meant to people like, why am I not seeing this? Why am I not seeing this? It was very all hands on deck to get it resolved. So really, and we didn't need to close the loop and say we owned it. And then we just said, okay, here's what we're doing to resolve it. And we had to check with every single person and just make sure it was super, super hand-holding. And it required everybody to get involved. So repetitive can be tricky.
That's interesting. So it was sort of a combination of a repetitive and a big kahuna. Right?
Fun times.
So
isn't it always the largest customer too?
Always. Yes. And you just,
and it's always Friday at 5 o'clock.
Every single time.
That's when the fire drills happen. So what's interesting to me about kind of what is covered in the expansion sale about this, and this is sort of an outline of kind of what they talked about as the most successful, not just the elements of the apology, but also the order because they tested both. And really what they're talking about here is that when you have just a major blowout, thing, like we had a situation at a company where I worked at, where basically what we were delivering was digital content. And this content that we were delivering for this company, it wasn't like one of the networks that had, mostly network and then video on demand content that they would make money from. This, all they did was video on demand. And we discovered that for 6 months, we had not successfully sent their content to the largest provider. And that was major, right? And so all we could think of is like, we're going to get sued. They're going to want us to be responsible for all of the business that they missed out on. And that would have not worked. That would have been a major issue, right? And so that is a situation where, as tough as it was, and we were all hands on deck for this, right? But that was when I would say we got the closest to a situation like this long before I ever read this book and it was ever tested, right? But where we certainly went in and we said, we have really bad news that we have to share. And this is the bad news. And then we literally and we told you as soon as we figured this out that it was happening, right? So that's the response speed. And then going through and saying, basically having the offer of repair, right? So, and we actually talked about compensation afterwards. We didn't talk about it beforehand, but we talked about what we were going to do. We acknowledged our responsibility. They definitely knew how sorry we were. And we had senior people on from the company, so they knew how serious we were about it. And we explained what had happened, what should have happened versus what did happen, what we were doing to fix it, to ensure that it wouldn't happen again. And then we basically said, this is what we're suggesting for reparation. We, gave them 6 months back. We gave them discount rates for the next 6 months. And, basically then said, we want you to sign on for longer though, because we really want to earn your faith back and that sort of thing. They ended up signing a 5-year deal instead of a 3-year deal with us, kind of thing. So it turned out really well, but it was touch and go before we had the conversation. So that was definitely a situation where when I read the order and everything, it really resonated with me because, that was a situation where we did it successfully. I don't know. There's probably going to be, this is probably something that's a ripe discussion that others will be able to share in, but Shawn and Cinthia, I know you also had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I love the way that they tested the order. That one graph I thought was super powerful in the book. That really demonstrated we tried it this way, we tried it this way. So this is probably up for debate, but I think I'm with you, Jan. This resonated with me as well. This order does really make sense. And at least it's a framework that you can present to your team. Because sometimes if there's no process, if you can present a data-backed process, it's at least a starting point. And quite frankly, it resonated with me. But Shawn, I know you've got some thoughts on this one.
Yes, I totally agree. Having a framework is better than not. I pulled a few examples. I unfortunately had to lead about 6 to 8 months ago. My voicemail to the client followed this. And my email opened up with just taking responsibility for what happened, and then it was repair. But I went and pulled my call, and it followed this framework. And so having the framework is super helpful.
You left a voicemail or you sent an email? What was the?
Both. There's a severe outage for a specific client. Client probably didn't want to hear from us, I'm guessing. I called and it went to voicemail, left a voicemail, then wrote an email, and we connected again. Short of it is it became a great client of ours, but we had to get through it and followed this framework. Eventually our communication improved tremendously. They would submit perceived bugs to me directly. They weren't bugs, but they were actually feature enhancements that could be a lot better. So I would work with this client, submit tickets, share the ticket. They're still with us. They've referred people. You could definitely recover.
They became advocates.
There's just a way to do it. Yes. Yep. And
That's a big
he opened
turnaround.
up on the call, just thanking me for owning it. That's what he said. He's like, that's all I wanted, just somebody to own it. And it was that simple. And we did the offer of repair, and there were some other things in there, but that de-escalated it right away. And we were just able to talk.
Wow.
Shawn, one of the things I like about that, I like obviously the whole process that turned out good, but I like that you called and emailed, because even though no one answers their phone anymore, including me, at least you're like brave enough to get on the call and potentially take the abuse. I think too much, there's a lot of hiding behind emails. And I think that was, in my opinion, and again, I'm sure this is highly debatable, I think it just demonstrates, I will take all of your heat. I'll take all the heat one-on-one. And at least leaving that voicemail. And then, of course, it's always, you need to follow it up with a documented email that they can share internally and not misread anything you say. But I think that gives them the opportunity. I think that sends a message. And I think it still sends a message to this day, even though, again, no one answers their phone.
Right. Glorious,
Agreed.
I'm really interested in what you put in the chat, because you're talking about being in the middle of an issue, but wondering if you could have handled it better. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Sure, yeah. So at the time of this huge customer, it was the main major source of revenue for the company. They wanted to publish the reports, and they found out that actual results that are calculated by our software is wrong. So it was a bug in the software that nobody found. So we reported back to the home office, which was in Europe. And the time difference was like day and night. So I had to work 24 around the clock to be with the customer and be with the dev team. And then we had triage meetings with the customer. Last minute, my manager canceled on them. So I was there in the meeting with the customer, and I had to constantly apologize. And I just assured that our team is wake up now, and they are working to resolve the issue. And they were getting close to the deadline because they had to report to the government or something. So I don't know if I could manage it better or not, and like what could I say to make it better. And I just kept promising that it's coming. And then by the time the dev team resolved the bug, the results were again wrong. So and then they missed the deadline and everything. So it was a disaster. And all the heat was on me from both sides, right? They pushed that, okay, you should buy us time. And the customer were pushing back.
There wasn't time. There was a deadline.
Yeah, exactly. And then I don't know, like nobody, as if nobody understood me, like, hey. So it was out of my control to solve the issue. But anyway, which side I should be? I don't know, really.
That's really interesting, because I remember too, back when I had a book of customers in, and this is when I was in entertainment tech, and the customer needed the content to get there because they had a whole like $1 million ad campaign around it. And if the content wasn't there, and they had tried to do the expedited turnaround and stuff, but for the manager in operations that I was dealing with, internally, she's like, we have thousands of pieces of content. I don't know, it should be there. And I'm like, no, I need you to check, because they're saying they don't see it. It's not there. We need to know if it's our problem or their problem. Like, we need to know. And she's like, yeah, I'm late. I got to go. And I was like trying to contact her all day long. And she was like, no, I'm in meetings. She was in internal meetings. I'm like, this is a customer.
Oh my
You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
right. So I can understand that pain.
Yeah, and they actually lose the customer if they churn. It would be your fault, right? Because you are the customer success manager.
Yeah.
Reality is just, come on, guys. So
right, Mike, you said you've got a good story. I'm curious.
I mean, I don't know. We'll simplify it with this. I experienced the most disrespectful customer that I've ever experienced in my career, my 5-year career. Recently, and was very fired up via email, and offer, he's like, whatever, gave his number, copied a few people in, said, call me now if you whatever. Anyway, I didn't call. I set up his time. It's like, hey, we can talk on Zoom there, because a lot of time people do talk big game on email, but then we'll treat you very respectfully. 9 times out of 10, that's the case. And this is
Right.
my first 1 out of 10 case of situation that wasn't. But at the end of the day, I think that handling these situations is relatively simple. It's and Shawn spoke to this earlier. It's a matter of owning the situation, saying, hey, here's what happened. Here's the summary. Here's the impact. Here's our resolution or our time to resolution. And then it's about bridging that gap, just like any other scenario that we're used to. It's about establishing what the path forward looks like and what actions and movements need to be made on both parties to move forward. And a lot of people love, well, not a lot, but some personas love to just meddle, like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? It's like, hey, we can't control that. The point is it happened. Let's focus on what we can do now and where we're going to go to continue the partnership moving forward. And I think that really is one show, like accountability, and then it's also showing that you're taking control of this conversation, because there is nothing you can do about the past. It's the past. So that was my
But how do they get assured that it isn't going to happen again, right? So like let's go back actually to the screen again, right? Because that's part of it though, is, an explanation of the problem. So that's why they're frustrated, right? Because they didn't get a real explanation of the problem, right? So when you think about these elements, that's what I like about these elements, right? They, because they're not going to let go until they get all of this satisfied, right? And then sometimes if you think about, and that gets to kind of what our questions are for today too, but where am I going here? But when you think about the, when you think about even when you're getting an apology, right? Like there are times when you're listening for these things, right? And until you hear it, then you're like, yeah, we're not done yet. That's how you feel. And it's the same thing in terms of how our customers feel, right? David. Medeo. Hey.
Yep. Hi. So I just wanted to jump in and say that it's interesting because apology is absolutely an art that we should all learn how to do better. And
They did
unfortunately,
test it. It can also be a science, just saying.
and we can also practice it. And unfortunately, we do have to practice it. And if you look at the comments, you can see a lot of people are adding a really great detail about the combination of triage of there's a problem and we don't know what it is yet. Whose fault is it? That's unknown, but doesn't matter. It's our problem. It's not your problem. It's not my problem. It's our problem. So, it's how you set expectations and boundaries around that to kind of build in this shared we're in it together mode, which reduces tension on everyone's point of view. And there's an art to the whole triage aspect of it. And then when it becomes clear that you're apologizing because of defects or whatever on your side, at that point, that's when a lot of these pieces kick in. But you need to be careful, and I think many people have had a lot of great detail about this. You need to be careful about apologizing too early, because as soon as you start apologizing, it is definitely your fault. And it's not always the case. And I'm not trying to say, well, it's not my problem. I'm trying to say sometimes you have to say, how are we getting to the heart of what the actual issue is? And let's, get our experts talking to each other to find out where the real problem is, so we don't have to do this ever again.
Right. Because this is once you've identified what the issue is, right?
Right.
And
yeah,
if
exactly.
you haven't identified what the issue is, as soon as you say sorry, then you're claiming the issue. And then they're like, hot potato, you've got it.
Yeah, you can't take it back.
Right. Interesting. Shawn.
And if I could add on to an outage we had, it was over 300 customers. It was very difficult. We offer a AI supported call tracking telephony product, and the numbers went down and patients couldn't reach their provider. So it was a big problem. I could not offer that this would never happen again, primarily because the outage wasn't on us, although the customer does not care, and that's the truth. And I actually had to go the other way and talk about how it could happen again, but I offered, here's what we've developed with our engineering team as an early warning pattern recognition system, and here's our plan of attack should we detect anomalies again, and here's what we're going to do. But I need to be clear, this could happen again, but here's our plan.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to share with anyone that's maybe dealt with, you really can't promise it
Right.
won't happen again.
And it wasn't even your fault either. Like you understood,
No.
you could share
No.
with them what the problem was. And, but it was still on you to figure out what were you going to do about it?
Yeah, we specifically identified, and from our partners, it wasn't our problem, but it didn't matter. It was just a co-developed product, and we're the client-facing part of this. So,
And was that
yeah.
a situation too, where you ended up switching providers at a certain point? Or was that a different?
That was enough to where we did terminate our relationship with that provider.
Yeah.
Because that happened to be
Not the
one example.
customer,
And there,
but the one that was creating the problem. Yeah.
correct. And now we haven't had anywhere near the volume of issues. There's still a probability with technical bugs and issues and things happen, as we all experience here, but not to the degree that they were happening. Nonetheless, providing a plan of what we will do went a long way with our customers.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, Shawn, I think once again, a key element of what your circumstance and why there was a positive result was because you didn't fall into that blame game trap. That's the worst thing. A customer does not care. They'll be like, hey, it's not us, it's that provider. They do not care. You can present that information, but the way using the framework and the way you present it, like, we uncovered what the issue was. Here's what it was. It was actually this provider. This is how we're going to resolve it. And here's our plan to. I love that early warning system. We can't control that. So this is how we're going to do that fail safe. Because if you start saying, oh, it was Joni, she does a terrible job. Well, you know, that's not me. Or it was this provider. The customer's going to turn into a freaking volcano and their head's going to explode. So that's a key element.
100%.
Yep. Yeah. Blame ends up escalating the anger instead. Yeah. We'll go to Ash and then we'll go to the breakout. Hey, Ash.
Hi. Yeah, it's like very interesting topic. Like I know on the chats, like Shawn was mentioning something about making sure that you know what the root cause is. And like I just remember on like one of our accounts, we had multiple hardware deals and during the pandemic, and because of like all the logistical constraints, there were massive delays on their hardware coming in on time. But I think we maybe didn't like really handle the messaging of like, it's not necessarily our fault, but this is like beyond like controllable circumstances, right? So we did a lot of work to like fix the issue. I had like weekly meetings with them, kind of like going through all the orders. I even like went crazy scouring, trying to figure out how to solve it by getting other like hardware options and replacing the orders. But then still, I think the approach that we took, it made it seem like it was our fault. So by the end of it, once everything was sorted out, despite all the effort that we put in for something that was beyond our control, it seemed like it was our fault. So they just decided to leave us after that. So I think that like understanding where the root causes, and then also kind of very clearly explaining where the issue lies and how it came about.
Yep. Yep. No, that's exactly the kind of thing that happens, right? Like if it doesn't get handled constructively, then sometimes they're out the door, right? And so that's why I think it is so important that we discuss this and come up with strategies. And it's another reason why I love that it was covered in this book, because it impacts churn. Right? It impacts retention. You can turn them into advocates sometimes, but or it can impact churn. Exactly that. So breakout questions, if you can recall a time when a company apologized effectively and you became more loyal, or the other is, have you used a similar approach to a big apology? So be sure to download both the slides and to reference, as well as the breakout notes. If you haven't used a similar approach, can you think of how these elements and the order of the discussion could help? Because that's another thing they tested, was the order of bringing these points up. So be sure to, in the chat, I think we've had those links if you haven't already. and we'll go for 15 minutes. And I'll do slightly smaller rooms since I keep giving us less time to do the group chat. So what kinds of things were you talking about there? We get any aha moments, constructive stories, or was it all commiserating?
I think we had a lot of what not to do.
What not to do?
Yeah.
Could still be learning, right?
When you're talking about what not to do, like how do you learn from that? Do you know what I mean? Like, tell me a bit more about that, Kyle, you know? Okay,
I
you're
think
on
I'm
mute, though. Just when you're imparting your wisdom.
I think there's a couple ways you can learn the wrong way, and there's the bad way, but the effective way, which is to do the wrong thing. But I think also if you're in a tough situation where you're going to need to communicate some hard news or to kind of take some lumps, certainly don't hesitate to run that by somebody who's more senior on the team or a manager, to just make sure you've got your messaging straight, and they can give you feedback on tone and things like that.
Was there ever a situation where you sort of went through something and learned the hard way that you were able to apply it in particular?
Never.
No.
Yeah, I mean, nothing extreme, because I've always been pretty decent at that, but certainly there are areas where I probably should have not been so quick to jump to accepting fault, and little things like that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing from my personal experience that's really caught up with me, thankfully. But I'm sure others have.
Yeah, now that's such a great point, and something I wish now we'd added into the slides too as guidance, because and I think that came up before we went to breakouts too, that if you accept fault too early before you know what's really happened, right? Then good luck taking that back. Good luck changing the story, right?
Yeah, and there are different things to apologize for too. Like, you can apologize that they've had a poor support experience, or but I think the worst is when you commit, and it's actually sort of the product. Since I think we're all in SaaS here. If you are throwing the product under the bus, and that's kind of core to the value that they're hoping to get from the organization. So that's, I think, important to steer clear of.
And that's why we also included Christy Falterusso's post, I think it was like from yesterday, right? Because throwing people under the bus or throwing your product under the bus is not necessarily a good approach, right?
No, never.
Yeah.
And one other thing that came up that I think was a really good call out is be very wary of pointing to any contracts. That is a way to really dehumanize the interaction. And depending on how good your contracts are, a good way to lose the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, great points. Thanks, Kyle. Any other aha moments or insights that you discussed in the breakout room you want to share? Any others?
I mean, I can do one more if you want, but
Yeah.
somebody said, like, don't go on mute. Like, if you're trying to figure something out, don't just go on mute for 40 minutes. And, take the customer along with you as you're going, explain what you're doing as you're doing it. I think that was Carrie brought that up. So that's there.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. So who brought that up?
Carrie.
Carrie?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, great. Carrie. Hey, Carrie.
I'm cooking dinner at the same time as listening.
Oh.
So
Oh, thanks for joining while you're cooking dinner. That's awesome.
yeah.
And was there anything you wanted to add to that?
I like the idea that someone has it in their system to actually respond automatically, have an automatic alert to respond to a customer if there's an issue that needs attention, rather than just letting them fester and wait until you get to them, but have it like every hour or every 3 hours where you are alerted, oh yeah, I need to find out what's going on with the situation and then
Mhm.
get back to them. Even if you don't have information for them, you're letting them know that you are thinking about them and you are taking care of it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I can speak to that. That was in our group. We built a case status in our Service Cloud and Salesforce instance that, depending on the severity of the escalation, will send alerts to a variety of people. 30 minutes, hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, that it's not out of the status. What is the status? Is it resolved? Respond to the client. What's going on? And so it'll allow multiple levels of leaders eyes on it, along with the individual contributor. And with that group of people, you should be able to help support each other and then respond to the client, keep them in a loop.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Shawn, the other Shawn Porcar. We've got a couple of James, a couple of Shawns.
Hey, I figured I'd chime in at the end so we don't get anyone confused. A couple things. First off, Amanda brought up something which I think is a really interesting and important point, is that apologies are moments for teaching and to empower the team. A lot of times there are leaders that feel that certain situations should just be handled themselves and don't realize that they're actually undermining the trust that their CSM or their team has built over months and maybe perhaps years with a client, whether small, large, executive, or junior individuals. And it's just so important, of course, determine what's most appropriate here. But oftentimes the first couple of passes, there's nothing wrong with ghostwriting an email, or you're just being a silent partner on that conversation to make sure that CSM or that individual gets an opportunity to have that conversation, or at least exercise that muscle a little bit. And then second, a little bit of a related topic. We used to do this years ago, when I was in the sales role, but we really spent a ton of time practicing, things like objection handling and overcoming certain challenges to get ourselves to the next step in the process. And I think, especially with tools like Gong today, there's no excuse for not taking a little bit of time to replay that footage, or even just spend some time practicing amongst ourselves, particularly because this is one of the most difficult conversations that many of us may have day in and day out. And it's important to just make sure we polish them a little bit better, because folks are going to be at a heightened state of emotion, and we want to make sure we're speaking from a place of empathy, and also speaking succinctly and clearly whenever possible. So taking a moment to practice or rehearse a conversation or review a conversation that you didn't think went very well, is something that I think we can all certainly try to do a little bit better of in the future.
Something that I experienced when I was with technical support, and I can totally see how this would work for certain types of industries, where you bring them, the customer that has the issue, in while you're doing the diagnostics, or show them the process. You're not just telling them what the problem was, but you involve them so that it does become a we in solving the problem. I did that when I had to follow up with somebody who had problem with their service like for 5 months. And I finally got on the phone with them and said, you know what, we're going to go with the technician on the phone and talk with him as he's testing the lines, because we need to both know what's going on. And they were so appreciative. And normally I would never have done that, but this customer needed that foundational support where they know where they stand.
Yep. Yeah, it can really make a big difference. Great. Any last insights to share before we head out? Because I know I've kept you over yet again. Bad Jan. I appreciate all the conversations that we're having, both in the large group and the breakouts. So it's awesome. Any other thoughts before we head out? Yeah, James?
Figure I would contribute on my very first attendance of this meeting. So I think it's been said in a lot of different ways, but I think one way that CSMs, one thing that makes really, really great CSMs is being able to protect your resources. Your apology is a resource. It very much is, right? So that's when a lot of people say, like, be careful apologizing too soon. In many ways, what you're doing with apologies is you're withdrawing from sort of that bank, that social bank you have with your account.
Mhm.
So if you apologize too soon, you can sometimes end up overpaying
Yeah.
for an interaction than you otherwise could have if you had kind of come prepared, looked at it from a different perspective, and been open to working with them, you know, towards really figuring out like, yes, you know, like absolutely, like this is our fault and stuff like that. So I think just a part around being careful with how you spend the resources that you build up with your client base. And yeah, I think apologies is a very, very special tool. And hopefully you don't have to use it very much
Right.
because it can really stop client growth as well. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Think about what your impulse words are. If your impulse word is to say, I'm sorry, then think about a different impulse word. You can say, oh, wow, tell me more about that. And if that became your phrase instead of I'm sorry, then you might get more information too.
Yeah. Harder to do as a Canadian, but
Yes.
I try my best.
That's right. That's right. Great. Well, on that note, the Canadian sorry to usher us out on the apology conversation. Looking forward to seeing you next week. We will be, as I mentioned earlier, going to be kicking off the topic of the industry series, but we still have much to do, because it'll just be talking about what are the frameworks, the foundations, and the variables, right? And then we need you all to get super excited thinking about your industry and how you're going to participate, or you know someone else who would be great. We're going to need 5 to 10 people for each session, for each industry topic, right? So that when we go to breakout rooms, they're going to facilitate the discussion in the breakout rooms too, so that you'll always have someone who's from that industry. You might be from that industry, or you might be there to learn about that industry. But as long as we make certain that we've got people from the industry in every single breakout room, then, you know, you will be sure to be able to share best practices, as well as, you know, do comparisons across different industries in each session. So that's the idea. This has been a dream of mine for over a year. Super excited. We have RevSetter as a partner and sponsor in making it all possible. And so I just can't even tell you how excited I am that we get to go in and do this. So we'll have a few other sessions after that. It'll be various topics. And as soon as we can get this organized, I'm kicking it off again, where we're actually digging into each industry. So, all right, that's my story. So excited to have you here. Great to have some first timers here tonight as well. And we'll see you again next week, and we'll see you in the community between now and then. So be sure to weigh in over in Slack. All right. Great to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.